The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing.
Hello everyone, I am Roveleh, one of the co-hosts of the Nuts and Bolts of Writing. Today I will be interviewing writer Ashwini Gangal. Two of her short stories have appeared in our literary magazine, the Unconventional Courier, namely Brown Gaze and Hotoli and Botoli. Her writings go deep into the human mind, and just when you think you understand the protagonist and her complexity, the story takes an unexpected turn and strikes you with the width of what there is yet to know. After completing a rigorous master's degree in clinical psychology, Ashwini Gangal switched fields completely and worked as a media journalist at afaqs, India's most trusted B2B.com, for 12 years, her specialty being advertising and marketing. In mid-2022, she moved on from afaqs to pursue her passion, poetry, fiction writing, academia, and scholarship. She is currently enjoying a creatively energizing sabbatical as she nurses her neuroses, eats through her savings, and tries not to go completely mad. She has books to help her with that, as she is an insatiable reader. Her own works of fiction have appeared in numerous publications, including Dance Macabre, Piker Press, The Bangalore Review, India Currents, The Huli Review, and many more. I have provided links to her stories published in the Unconventional Courier, to her website, and social media in the description of this interview. Hello, Ashwini, and welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Writing.
Hi, Helevorn. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here and to be able to discuss literature and other topics with you today. So one thing I love about your stories is that they blend realism and a minute attention to details in painting society and human nature with an unexpected surrealism. And I think many of them have a dark edge. I think you take your stories in a bold direction and then give them this thrilling twist. And still you manage to keep the focus on character psychology. And I think this is quite rare because we don't often encounter this with contemporary prose, because I think we either see a focus on the twists, so a more plot-oriented story, or a more static piece about mundane human experiences. So I think your style is really striking, which leads to my first question. What inspires you to write like this?
Wow. Thank you so much. That's a very long question. Thanks for all the compliments. I have to tell you, even my mother keeps asking me, why can't you write something cheerful, something happy for a change? Why is your work so depressing and so dark and morbid?
I think parents often have this concern.
Yeah. She's like, why can't you write a love story for a change? I said, no, that's boring. But I think, so I have introspected, I didn't even realize I have this bent or this kind of tack before people started pointing it out. And now that you asked me, I'm really introspecting. So this morning I was thinking, oh my God, I haven't rehearsed or practiced at all. I don't know what I'm going to say when she asks me this. But then a tiny voice in my head said, hey, Ash, you've been rehearsing for this interview all your life. You've been waiting for someone to ask you questions about your work and your creativity. So, I think I'm naturally drawn to it. I don't think it's by design. I think it's just an orientation that I can't really help. So if I see a human being, part of my mind is thinking, oh, in 70 years, that's corpse. That's going to be a corpse in a grave. Or if I see an apple today, a fresh red apple, a part of my mind is thinking, oh, in 2 days, if you don't put this in the fridge, it's going to have fungus on it. So it's weird, but it's just an orientation. This sort of thing comes readily to me. So I don't think it's deliberate or by design. But it's also that, I really feel to be happy, we all kind of delude ourselves and we forget about all the bad stuff that goes on around us and in the world. But I'm very sensitive to it. So maybe that's another place it comes from. So I really see the world through, very realistic glasses. There's no rose tint on my glasses. I see things as they are. And that sometimes gives a dark or negative spin to things. So I don't delude myself about how horrible the world really is. So maybe that's where it comes from.
I see. Yeah, that's a very interesting explanation. So in a sense, it is empathy, it is your introspective nature and your analytical nature as well, because you look very deep into things.
Yes, yes. And again, not by design. I don't wake up one morning, I don't wake up and say, oh, today I'm going to write something dark. Let me write something horrible or morbid where bad things happen. No, it just comes naturally. So it's only now that I'm analyzing it because I've been getting these questions.
All right. So I'm thinking, does it have to do with also the type of fiction you like to read and not only to write? Do you, I know that you love reading a lot. And I was meaning to ask you about this. Do you usually read authors that are similar to what you write? And have you got any authors in work of fiction that you draw upon when creating your own stories?
Let's see. So see, my main endeavor is to be original. So no, I don't try to write like the authors I read. I'm very aware of this whole thing of, imitation or copying your favorite authors. So I try to avoid that very deliberately. But let's see. I think this happened in the pandemic. So this whole orientation kind of came into its own after March 2020. So what happened was I stayed indoors for a very long time. A lot of people did, so I know it's not a unique thing, but I was classified as someone on the paranoid end of the spectrum because my friends were cheating a lot and they kind of went out, met their girlfriends and boyfriends and, went out and had little, coffee dates with each other. But I really didn't. So I didn't go anywhere. And that I think did something to me. So on the one hand, my house kind of came alive for me. So when you spend so much time indoors in the same place, sitting on the same sofa, doing the same stuff every day, things get repetitive, things change. Your whole orientation, your perspective changes. So one thing that happened was my house came alive for me and it became like this giant monster or organism. And I was merely a part of that big monster. So I was like an organ in the stomach or in the body of this monster, which was my house. I was like a wandering spleen in the body of this house. That happened. So that also put like a twist to it. But your question really was about the stuff I read. So when I was indoors, when I, me, the wandering spleen in this monster, kept on reading. So I just kept on reading non-stop, day in, day out. I had a job, of course, but by night I would just keep reading. And I started reading about past pandemics. So that's how it all started. And because on the one hand, we used to watch the news. My mother and I, we were very clued into what was happening with the numbers, with the deaths, with the COVID figures. So there was the news, which was very much about the here and now, or then and now, I should say, because this was back in 2020. But in that moment, it was about what was going on in the real world. But then when I read books on past epidemics and past pandemics, I realized that this is our moment. This is our big plague moment in this century. But it's something that humankind has lived with from the beginning. So there was this surreal sense of the hourglass kind of shattering. There is no present and future and past. Infectious disease is something we have lived with ever since we've inhabited the planet. It just so happened that we kind of woke up to it collectively in March 2020 and onwards. But so it's not just airborne infectious diseases. I started reading about, say, smallpox, cholera, the 14th century plague, syphilis, HIV/AIDS, influenza, rabies, tuberculosis. So I started reading about all these diseases and what they did to the human to the human condition, as it were. So maybe that kind of bled into my writing. All this reading, not so much in terms of style, but as inspiration. And I realized that infectious disease is it's as normal as a healthy day. So, and not just that, it kind of turned me into a bit of a misanthrope also, because I realized that a lot of these are caused by the ecological damage that humans have inflicted upon the planet. So we have hastened the process of the spread of infectious diseases in a big way. And not just that, the only vista or vantage point that you and I have is the human Homo sapien perspective. But when you think from the perspective of any other creature, us and viruses, or us and germs, or us and bacteria, us and fungi, us and parasites are not that different. Because what does the plague germ, or the flea want to do? It wants to thrive, multiply, survive, and live off other creatures. That's exactly what we do as humans. We want to multiply, create more humans. We live off other animals. We eat them. We breed them for consumption. So then you realize that you start empathizing with the virus, and you start realizing that we're not that different. Forget about being superior. We're actually two types of species with the same goal. And we're just caught in this battle of territory, pretty much. So I think all these things, all this realization bled into my writing. And I didn't even realize at the time that this was becoming my type or my theme or my style. It's only now that I look back on the stuff I've written over the past 2-3 years that I also do a double take and say, hey, this is all, you can string it all together and you can join these dots and draw a straight line through all these pieces of writing. And they do have a common theme, which is not very bright.
This is truly fascinating. And I think that in the past years, we all have had the chance to reflect a bit on pandemics, but then the perspective that you detail upon right now, it's truly fascinating. I hadn't thought about it like this, about our commonalities with the virus and with other organisms. And may I say that I know that one of your stories, memories from that story of yours are coming back to me now that you describe the house as a living organism. And I don't want to give any spoilers to the readers of the Unconventional Courier, but I think we're going to see that story quite soon. And am I wrong? Is that story influenced by your ideas during the pandemic as well?
So are you talking about Hotoli and Botoli?
No.
Abaka and the Intruder.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Abaka and the Intruder pretty much happened, in my house. And that's where the inspiration came from. Because I really do think that fiction is nothing but like an embellished, exaggerated, hyperbolic version of reality. So when you ask a fiction writer where he or she gets his or her ideas from, it's a redundant question because it's pretty much from their own lives. So I do think that fiction is like the author's own reality observations, real life insights, but on steroids. So Abaka and the Intruder is, it was very much my day-to-day that inspired it, but it's obviously a very exaggerated version of that.
I see. That is fascinating. And now I'm going to reread your story through this lens, in the light of what you just said. So, wow, I actually wanted to ask you about the inspiration because for those stories that we have already published in the Unconventional Courier, and the one that's coming out this month. So, well, you said that is from your own experiences, but I'm still going to ask you because I find them fascinating. So, Brown Gaze, the one that already appeared. It's a wonderful short piece about cultural identity. Given that it's more rooted in the real world than some of your other stories, I mean, all of them are rooted in the real world, but would you say that this one is a bit more personal to you? Or not?
Yes. Really? Definitely. No, definitely. And this one is actually it's very different from the kind of stuff we've been discussing so far, right? The dark themed, morbid, macabre stuff. So this one is actually, though it's fiction, I would classify Brown Gaze as fiction. It can pretty much be non-fiction also, because this is something that actually happened to me. So I'm very new here in the United States. I've been here for less than 4 months. And when I was when I landed, I was in San Francisco and I used to take walks around the area in Pacific Heights. And there are lots of Indians here. There are lots of brown people here, right? So what happens is you make fleeting eye contact with people and it's fine. But when you make eye contact with someone of your own color, something happens. It's just 1 second. It takes 1 second to it's like an acknowledgement. It's not even a smile sometimes. It's just a gaze, and that's where it came from. So there's half a nod, or just like 1/10 of a smile. It's like an acknowledgement of shared ancestry, of shared lineage, of shared pigmentation. And it might be borderline, politically incorrect to say this and to place such an equity on pigmentation and color, especially in these times. But it's true. And a friend of mine told me that, similarly, there's something called the black nod, that when two black-skinned people make eye contact in a foreign country, they also they nod at each other. There's a very micro nod, and that's it. It's a nanosecond, and you move on. So I've seen that. I've even the same friend also told me that this happens with different subcultures as well. So when she had pink hair, the same click would happen when she made accidental eye contact with other people on the street, strangers with green hair or yellow hair or pink hair. So it was like, oh, I get you, I feel you, sister, or I get you, brother. It was like that. So you've also colored your hair a very outlandish color. So have I. So for this one moment, we're united. And then that's it. Our paths cross and we move on. So I think it happens with different types of subcultures. But in my case, I tried to capture what happens with ethnicity.
Wow, this is excellent, and it's really fascinating when you put it like this, because you feel some shared experiences in a way when you look at someone who is similar to you, whether it's about ethnicity or like you said, the aesthetic preferences, or yeah, that's true. I think it happens. I really love metal music, heavy metal, and this thing also happens between heavy metal fans, right? When you see someone with black leather and spikes and everything, they are always nicer to each other, if it makes sense.
Exactly.
Maybe to some people they may seem threatening, but when you see someone who is dressed like you, you're like, hey, brother,
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. Suddenly there's an us and them. So part of me is terrified right now, because I don't want, I don't want to sound incorrect in any way or inappropriate by saying this, but it happens. It can happen with beards, it can happen with turbans, it can happen with piercings, tattoos. It can happen with anything that kind of makes an in-group and alienates the larger population in the best way possible. So not in a bad way.
Yeah, that's true. And do you think this makes integration easier when you are living in a different country, or it doesn't really matter in that sense?
Integration, in a weird way, this is quite the opposite, right? Because by acknowledging someone who's the same color as you, it's the opposite of integration, because that's like saying, hey, you and I have this big thing in common that others around us don't. So I think not really, it doesn't really aid the integration process, but it's a bit like shared nostalgia. Like, if you show me a brown person, I already feel like I know something more about the person than the average person knows about that person, because I'm also brown. There's some assumptions I can make about them just basis color. So it's more that.
Yeah, that's really well put. And like I said, brown gaze is very different from the story that will appear next in the Unconventional Courier, which is Hotoli and Botoli. So without giving any spoilers, I can say that although it is also centered on the experiences of two women, it is very different from brown gaze. To me, it almost has a mythical feel. So what was that inspiration behind that one?
Thank you. I'm glad that came across, because that was the intention. I wanted it to be more than normal, or just something little more than ordinary. I wanted that haunting feel to emanate from the words, and I'm glad that happened, assuming that's what you meant when you said mythical. Sorry, the question was the inspiration behind it, right? So like I mentioned earlier, I'm very preoccupied with being original. I don't want to repeat any templates or archetypes that other authors have used in the past. So I'll give you a bit of context. So there was a competition I was writing for. I didn't win. I didn't even get shortlisted. So Hotoli and Botoli was something I wrote for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize 2-3 years ago. And I think I don't remember the exact year, but it was a weekend, and I was looking online for competitions, and I saw this one, and this is a very prestigious one. So I saw the word limit, I saw what they needed, and I said, okay, I have this germ of an idea. Maybe I can just take the weekend and write something. So that's how it happened. So I wrote it very fast. But then when I think back, I think the germ was marinating in my brain. It was kind of fermenting for a very long time. So this started a few years ago, pre-pandemic almost, but I had this strange idea of, again, it's so difficult to explain this without spoiling the ending, but I had this strange idea of, let's just call it XYZ. So XYZ type of people in society who are integrated in society, but could be your neighbors, right? And obviously this is borderline dystopia because you can't just go to the market and purchase what they purchase, right? So the fact that there's an organized market and trade for the kind of thing they're purchasing for consumption means this is not the society you and I live in, or could it be? So do you really know your neighbors? That's the question. And also I think this part of it was the shock value. I want to shock people because I feel very strongly about vegetarianism. So and about meat consumption. I think it's cruel to breed animals for consumption, but somehow it's so normalized that we don't bat an eyelid when we see a slaughterhouse or a poultry farm. It's and I've also eaten meat in the past. I've turned vegetarian very recently, but somehow that doesn't shock us. But it's pretty much the same thing. But we're only able to understand the magnitude of what goes on behind those closed doors when we think of ourselves in that position. So, I sound like a crazy person right now because I'm not really revealing what it is about, but and hopefully the reader will know once they read it. But
yes, exactly. And when this interview comes out, the story will have come out as well. So, yes. So, wow, that's a wonderful explanation, and I hadn't made the connection with what you said. So it's fascinating to ask an author to be able to ask an author about their inspiration for a certain story. It's always interesting what they say.
Yeah, I was so nervous about being able to articulate this properly because it's one thing to write something, privately, and it's a whole other thing to explain it in so many words like this. So I hope I'm making some sense.
Oh, yes, very much. Especially after you read the story, then it makes a lot of sense and it's really fun to hear.
Yeah, thank you.
So, about your writing process, how do you write? Is it a more structured approach, or do you have a writing schedule? Because I know that a lot of authors say that you need to have a writing schedule, or do you mainly write when you have inspiration? I know that you just mentioned that sometimes you have ideas that you allow to ferment for a very, very long time until you put them on paper. So I get the sense that your writing is not extremely impulsive. Or
no, see, I'll tell you what's impulsive. The impulsive part is the note taking. So I always have a notebook, or if I don't have a notebook and pen handy, I make I make these drafts on my phone and little notes, or I WhatsApp myself or email myself. So that part is impulsive, but I think you can't write a story, or you can't write an essay or a poem or any kind of fiction or anything for that matter till the time is right. So that part can't be spontaneous, which is why structure doesn't work for me. So if I wake up every morning at say 7 a.m. and say, okay, between 7 and 9, I'm going to write at my desk, I may draw a blank, but it just comes suddenly. And that's when you go back to your notes and start giving some structure to all those crazy notes. So if you look at my notebook, it's like an insane person's notebook. So there's colors and there's scribbles everywhere, and it's just I feel but sorry, this is not going to be on video. I was grabbing my notebook to show the audience, but anyway, I'll show you. But if you see this notebook, it's just full. So this is an entire notebook of ideas. So this is like 100 books or 100 stories in here. And
wow, that's
but if you ask, it's a lot. But but I'm not that prolific when it comes to actually fleshing these out. So I may end up giving life to just maybe 4 or 5 of these over the next 2 years. So I'm more prolific with my note making and my insight mining than I am with my actual writing. So no, structure doesn't work. But then once the moment comes, then there's no stopping it. Then you have to stop whatever you're doing. Sometimes I go home if I'm out with friends or if I'm doing something outside. I just cut that short and go home because you're feeling that urge to write. And then you just go and, give life to that idea. That's been growing for a long time in your mind and in your notebook.
I see. I can really relate to what you're saying because I'm sort of the same. I can be very chaotic when it comes to my thoughts, and I also am a kind of a slow writer. I mean, I'm a very slow writer. So
really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm not sure I ever wrote, a short story in a day or something. That I've heard writers saying that, oh, this short story I wrote it in a day. That never happened to me. I take notes and then I have to spend a lot of time to really let it sit and to put on layers and layers. And like you said, if I just sit down and I want to, and I say, okay, now I'm going to write, maybe I will end up writing like 3 sentences in 2 hours. So,
yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't take too long. Once the moment arrives, I can give birth to a story, say in a day or 2.
So this is, yeah. So what if you already had the idea and you've thought about it for a while, then the actual writing, yeah, that's true. I was thinking about getting the idea and writing it in one day. That never happened to me.
Yeah. So Hotoli Botoli happened over a weekend because there was also a deadline that always helps. And I think it's a quite a long story. It's more than 2,000 words, but I wrote it over 2 days. So I didn't do first draft and second draft. What I did for that was, now that you make me think about this, I think I did half and half. I wrote the first half on Saturday, second half on Sunday morning, and then I revised the entire thing in one go on Sunday night.
I see. So, let's see. You said that notes are helpful to you, so that's one thing. And spontaneous notes, so always having something at hand to write, the phone or a notebook or something. So that's one thing that helps you. And also deadlines. Do you think if you set a deadline for yourself without being pressured by a contest or something, do you think that helps?
Yes, I think deadlines always help. I live by deadlines because I was a journalist, right? For the last 12 years, I was a media journalist in Mumbai, where I've moved from. So headlines and deadlines were my life for 12 years. So it always helps. A lot of people tell me that it kills the creativity and it puts pressure and then you can't do your best work. I don't identify with that at all. I think it always helps. Because we all procrastinate. I think creative people more than others. We procrastinate and we kind of romanticize procrastinating also. We say, no, let it fester for some more time. Let me develop it a little more. That's nonsense. I think if you just, whip yourself to write faster, you'll just write as well as you would have if you had taken 10 more days for it. So deadlines always help me.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually excellent advice because I wanted to ask you what advice you have for writers. So, well, that's really excellent because yes, I think we often procrastinate.
Yeah, so that's the journalist in me, because in journalism, deadlines are sacrosanct.
That's true. So, do you think that journalism has helped you in your writing, in your fiction writing career as well?
Definitely, yes. Journalism teaches you to be economical with your words. It teaches you to avoid redundancies. If you can say the same thing in 2 lines, don't use 10. So journalism kind of teaches you to edit your own work as you write it. So I wouldn't use the word censor, but sometimes that too, because we're all, we're drunk on our own ideas and we're in love with our own words. So we don't really have the heart to cut anything out. You want everything to be published. But when you're a journalist, there's part of you that's indulging yourself, and there's part of you that's bringing the scalpel to your words and saying, no, this has to go. No, the reader's going to get bored over here. So I think the journalist in me is the editor in me keeps that. That's what's the word for it? It keeps the stringency alive in my writing. I don't overindulge myself.
That's true. Right. So you had a lot to learn from your career as a journalist.
Definitely, definitely. Because it's all about words, right? Though in journalism, of course, you're interviewing people and it's news reporting and it's news publishing. Sorry, beg your pardon. It's news publishing, but it's still you're still playing with words. You still want to use the right words in the headline. You only have a certain number of characters or words you can use in a headline, and that has to bait the reader to read the entire article. So in many ways, when I'm deciding on the titles for my stories, I put on my journalist and editor's hat and think of my title as a headline for the story, which is then the news article.
I see. Right.
Which could also double up as a news article. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So, apart from literature, I know that you are also interested in mental health, and I have a feeling that this ties a lot with your with all the psychology that you put into your stories. Could you tell us a bit more about this interest of yours?
Yeah, definitely. So more than an interest, it's also my background and my training. So this was, of course, many years ago. This was in 2009, but I got my master's in clinical psychology from Mumbai University. So I'm trained to diagnose and to treat mental disorders and mental illness. So I've interned at a mental hospital back in India, and so though I never practiced as a psychologist, that kind of gave me a lens for the rest of my life. So after my master's, I put on that lens and I've not removed it since. So I do see the world through that lens even today. So maybe that also bleeds into my writing, my fiction writing now, and also my reading. So I do read a lot of books on mental health and mental illness, just for pleasure, just to keep that spark alive, because I'm genuinely interested in it. So that's it's my educational background that has brought that to my life and my work more than anything.
That's really fascinating to see how two passions of yours, which is journalism and mental health, are influencing your writing and are bleeding into your stories, and also inspiring you.
As it turns out, yes. It's so funny, Helevorn. A lot of these things I'm noticing now for the first time through this conversation. So I didn't even realize a lot of these things. So thanks to you, I can now see all the mixed and parallel influences that are coming into my. I hate the word bleed. I've used it 4 times already, but that bleed into my writing. Yeah.
I see that. That's excellent. Indeed, talking about your own writing really helps you crystallize your ideas and the processes that you were doing, but you weren't really aware of.
Exactly. And see, I just caught myself there because I realized I've used the word bleed into 4 times in a conversation. So imagine if this was something I was writing, the editor and me would use synonyms. I would say, okay, I've used bleed once. Now say seep into or soak into or something else, permeate into, percolate into. So that's the journalist in me, trying not to repeat the same word 2 or 3 times in the same story. So it happens even in conversations when I catch myself using the same metaphor or the same adjective. I kind of say, no, use a different word now. It's getting boring. So.
I see.
Can't switch it off. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
One last question for you, because I know that you really love reading, and you've already told us about the nonfiction that you are interested in. How about the fiction? Have you got some favorite authors?
Yeah, I have. So I really like reading translated fiction. So fiction that was not written in English originally. So I like Orhan Pamuk, the Turkish author. I like Elif Shafak, who's also Turkish. But unlike Orhan, who writes in his native language and then gets his work translated into English, Elif Shafak is also Turkish, but she writes in English. So I read her books in the language that she writes them in. But she's also Turkish. Then I like... which other translated fiction do I read? So I'll get back to you on that. But I also enjoy Salman Rushdie. I also enjoy Jhumpa Lahiri. I like Donna Tartt, contemporary writer. She fascinates me. So this note making thing, I just flatter myself because she also does this. So I read in some interview of hers that she does this as well, and she makes a lot of notes. And I said, hey, I have something in common with a Pulitzer Prize winning author. That's I've arrived. So I, but turns out she also does that. And that's purely coincidental. Like I didn't copy that style. So Donna Tartt is someone I really love. So I love The Goldfinch. She's written only 3 novels. Can you believe it? So she takes speaking about slow writing, she takes about a decade to write a book. 10 years.
Wow.
So she took 10 years to write The Goldfinch and another 8 or 10 years to write her second book. Sorry, I don't even think Goldfinch is her second. I think Goldfinch is her third. I think The Little Friend and The Secret History are the first and second, not necessarily in that order. But yes, so over 3 decades, she produced 3 books. Yeah, so I really love her work.
I had no idea.
This is a tangent.
Sorry. Yeah, this is really encouraging for someone like me.
Yeah, I'm also a very slow reader. So forget about slow writing. I read very slowly. I read a lot, but I read slow. I know people who just breeze through books, on one flight of say 8 hours, they finished one book and I finished maybe 5 pages in the same amount of time. I can't read fast. So I meditate on every word.
It's really good to internalize, right? When you read something.
Yeah. And to absorb it, just let it sink in. So I read carefully. Otherwise, you're just trying to tick mark things and say, oh, I finished one more book. But that's not the point. The point is to actually enjoy it. And no one's keeping score. No one's counting. Nobody cares, actually, how many books we've read. Yeah.
That's very true. It's always best to let it inspire you and to absorb things that, not that you can use literally in your writings, but just let it inspire you and get you into that mood of the world of words, right?
Yeah, the use thing has to be incidental. That can't be intentional. The intentional part is to just enjoy it in the moment, to just read it for its own sake, not as a means to an end, but an end in itself. Just enjoy that moment of reading.
Wow, that's very true. Wow, this was really fascinating to talk to you. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left, but I really want to thank you for all of the wonderful ideas and what you revealed about your stories, about your inspiration and your worldview, and also the advice for writers, because in this podcast, we talk about how to approach certain aspects of the writing process. So your advice is also wonderful for people who are writing, not only new writers, but it's always it can always be a struggle. I think we all have our moments of doubt, and it's great to hear other authors that ourselves inspired by the way we approach things.
Thank you so much. Not just moments of doubt. My goodness, I think I live in doubt. Like I just live with self-doubt. So it's moments of confidence. Because the law
I relate so much. Yeah. It's not the other way around.
It's horrible. So it's like, don't let my smile fool you. I'm terrified right now.
This is really excellent to talk to authors that you admire and to realize that they have very similar concerns and struggles as you do. So this is why conversations like this are really wonderful and enlightening. So thank you so much, Ashwini Gangal. This was a fantastic conversation.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, Helevorn. I'm so happy. I'm so happy right now because, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I've been rehearsing for this for a very long time, for 2 decades. I've practiced my answers. This is what I'm going to say when someday someone interviews me about my writing. So, this is a small moment of glory for me. So thank you.
That's excellent. And I hope to see you again on our podcast and in our magazine, The Unconventional Courier. So thank you again, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.